Hello everyone and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more content. Today we're going to look at one of the most dangerous and well-known criminals to ever exist in the UK criminal underworld, Mr. James Alfred Moody. He was born on the 27th of February 1941, a very different Britain to the one we see today. He was a well-known and well-feared English gangster and hitman whose career spanned for more than 4 decades. During his criminal career, he had run-ins with notorious gangsters of such caliber and infamy as the Mad Frankie Fraser, the Cray Twins, the Richardsons, all of which we've covered in previous videos if you'd like to check that out. Now, he was described by local police detectives as an extremely professional individual and an extremely intimidating character, so sounds like a nice guy. Now, it is well known at the UK criminal underworld that Mr. Moody's specialty was robbing armoured trucks, and he used a chainsaw to saw through the side of security vehicles, so the guy was either a genius or he had a really good chainsaw. Now, this was a practice that a lot of the high-ranking British criminals would use back then to get their organised criminal careers off the ground. Mr. Moody was born to a mother who was a wartime evacuee from Camberwell in London. His father was killed during World War II after his ship was torpedoed by a German U-boat. Mr. Moody was an enforcer for the Richardson gang and was known to do freelance work for the Crays. He was considered by many of his peers to be at one time the hardest man in London, although I imagine there are a few crooks out there who'd have something to say about that. In the 70s, he joined a team of organised criminals to form the Chainsaw Gang, which sounds to me like something straight out of a horror film. The gang went on to become that decade's most successful group of armed robbers. This gang really cleaned up in the 70s, enabling them to live a nice, comfortable lifestyle. Mr. Moody was convicted, along with his brother Richard, of manslaughter in 1967 for the killing of William Day, a young merchant navy steward. He was released in 1972, but was sent back again in 1979, this time on remand to the notorious Brixton prison to await trial for another armed robbery. This guy kept himself quite busy. His cellmate whilst in Brixton prison was the provisional IRA member Gerard Tweet, who himself is an interesting character, and we're going to go more in depth into this guy's life soon in another video, so keep an eye out for that, guys. Now, the two men, the fellow robber Stan Thompson, all escaped Brixton prison on the 16th of December 1980, which put them to the top of Scotland Yard's most wanted list. Now, it is also alleged that Mr. Moody had been paid £10,000 by the IRA, which would have been valued roughly today at just shy of £136,000, just to help get Mr. Tweet out of the prison system. Fleeing to Northern Ireland, Mr. Moody worked with the Provisional IRA. It was there that Mr. Moody coined the expression of awarding someone an OBE, which stood for one behind the ear, or a shot in the head, a play on the OBE award. The expression was reportedly used by killers in Belfast for the next decade or so he was a real trendsetter. Mr. Tweet, being a prominent IRA member, was later arrested in Dublin on other charges. Still on the run, Mr. Moody returned to London in the late 1980s, where he was now known as Mick the Irishman. Now, he was also wanted by the Royal Ulster Constabulary and the British Security Services. Unfortunately, he was shot dead on the 1st of June 1993 in the Royal Hotel, which is now the Royal Inn, on the Park in Hackney, East London, by an unknown assailant who was described as being in his late 40s and wearing a leather bomber jacket. The assailant apparently fled in a stolen Ford Fiesta. Not the worst car we've seen so far in Street Crime UK. Following his death, Mr. Moody was linked to multiple unsolved murders, including that of gangster David Brindle in August of 1991. There was another businessman as well called Terry Gooderham and his girlfriend Maxine Arnold in Epping Forest, and that of a couple called the Dixons, who were walking the Pembrokeshire coast in June of 1989 and were thought to have inadvertently unearthed a cache of provisional IRA weapons. There was also speculation he was involved in the murder of the car dealer Nick Whitting, found in Rainham, Essex in 1990. However, it was Pembrokeshire-based serial killer and rapist John Cooper who was found guilty of the murder of the Dixons in 2011. The police were unable to establish what Mr. Moody had been doing since his return to England, nor who had arranged his council flat for him. His flat was only traced 3 weeks later after his death, by which time it had been completely emptied. It was thought that he had discovered an IRA arms cache and was shot because of that, although it was also noted he had an extensive criminal history of gangland crime, and it was also suspected that he may have been involved in a wide range of criminal activities, including several murders. He had been on the run for about 13 years since escaping prison, and kept going so long due to having known the Kray twins and the Richardson gang from the 60s. He had been on the run for about 13 years since escaping prison, and kept going so long due to his great relationship with the Kray twins and the Richardson gang from the 60s. At the time, he had been living in the first floor council flat at Flat 12, Wayton Street, Hackney, just off of Mare Street, and he used to walk to the Royal Hotel public house on the edge of Victoria Park, about half a mile away, and he'd go 2 or 3 times a week, generally during the weekdays and always in the afternoon. It was not known how he got his council flat, which had custom security grills over the windows, which is clearly, it shows he means business. It was not clear if anyone even knew that he lived there or if they knew he was on the run. He was described as being a 6 foot tall, broadly built with black brows and greying hair. He was also described as a brick shithouse, extremely intimidating and a fearsomely hard man, resulting in a lot of villains in the UK criminal underworld being terrified of him. It was said that 2 days after his murder, an unnamed policeman said Mr. Moody was not the sort of guy you fight. You don't punch him, you don't rough him up, you just have to kill him. His final route had took him along the Grand Union Canal and down the Gore Road to the Royal Hotel. He had left his flat at around 7:30 PM on Tuesday the 1st of June 1993 to go to the Royal Hotel, and was still there drinking around 10 PM when most of the customers had gone home and there were only about 4 people left there. Now, Mr. Moody had been standing at the bar between the 2 entrances drinking a beer when a Ford Fiesta car pulled up outside the pub, parked in a space in front of the park gates. The driver then got out, walked into the pub, ordered a pint, put in £2 in 2 £1 coins on the bar, and then walked straight up to Mr. Moody and shot him 4 times with a Webley .38 revolver, swearing at him as he did so, which was said to have been very unusual for a professional hit. Whoever it was must have been a very dangerous person to even get so close to Mr. Moody. The gunman was said to have been between 5 foot 10 inches and 6 foot tall, aged between 30 to 40 years old, with blue eyes, a lightly tanned face, and blonde or possibly greying shoulder-length hair. He had been wearing a dark-bound jacket on the night. It was noted by witnesses that the gunman had not even touched his drink, so this guy didn't even take a sip. He just walks in, orders his drink, and then with no hesitation walks over to Mr. Moody and executes him with 4 rounds to the chest. Crazy. As he shot Mr. Moody, 2 young women approached from the left-hand entrance from the street and tried to come in, but the gunman slammed the door in their faces and then left by the other door which he had come in from and drove away. His post-mortem showed that Mr. Moody had 2 bullet wounds to his back, 1 to his chest and another to his head. When his body was searched though, they found that he had not only got his flat keys but also £90 in cash on him, so if his cash was left on, this must have been a hit. It was also found that attempts had been made to remove an eagle tattoo and the tattoo of a geisha girl from his arms, which was presumably done because he was on the run from authorities and he wanted to disguise his identity. As well as his convictions for manslaughter in 1967, he was also known for armed robberies on security vehicles and his use of a chainsaw to cut through the sides of them. It was said that gangs that he had been involved with had taken over £2 million. He was also known for committing crimes whilst dressed up like a policeman. It was said that he had been involved in a hold-up in the Blackwell Tunnel in 1978, during which he had been dressed as a policeman and confiscated the keys from an armoured car as well as the other cars in the tunnel to stop them getting away. However, the local criminals started to think that he had become arrogant, and it was this arrogance that led to his 1979 arrest, when he was arrested for 3 armed robberies totalling £930,000. Whilst awaiting trial, he had been in an adjoining cell with a member of the IRA, and they apparently became good friends. Then, later on, when he and another man organised their breakout from Brixton Prison, they took the IRA member with them. They were said to have burrowed out using tools that they had smuggled into the prison in a sock. It was reported that following his escape from Brixton Prison, that numerous crimes and a handful of murders were attributed to him, including the 1991 murders of David Brindle and Stanley Silk, who were shot at the Bell Pub in East Street, Walworth, and whose murders themselves are currently unsolved. It was also suggested that he had been responsible for the shootings of Terry Guderham and Maxine Arnold, who were shot in a Mercedes-Benz car in Epping Forest in 1989. It was also suggested that shortly after his murder, that he had been involved in the murder of Peter Dixon and Gwenda Dixon, who were at the time on holiday in Littlehaven, Pembrokeshire, in June 1989, which was near an arms dump. However, that murder was later attributed to John William Cooper, who was convicted for it, as well as other murders in May of 2011. However, there were no suspects or arrests in Mr. Moody's murder. A gangster that later wrote a book that touched on Mr. Moody's murder wrote that when you're dead, you get the blame for everything. He said that following Mr. Moody's murder, he was blamed for numerous crimes up and down the country, including the murders of Peter Dixon and Gwenda Dixon on the premise that they had discovered an IRA weapons cache, and that because Alfred Moody had escaped as an IRA member, that must be he was involved. The author noted that dead people can't sue you, so people say whatever they like. He said that in the case of Peter Dixon and Gwenda Dixon, that it was easy to connect Mr. Moody after his death, but he also noted that alternatively, it could just have easily have been Father Christmas. Now, Jimmy Moody and the crimes he committed will never be forgotten in the UK criminal underworld, and I want to thank everyone for watching, and until next time guys, stay safe